I've come to realize not only does perfectionism not help you do your best work, but it actually prevents you from doing your best work because it's a symptom of something deeper. And if you were to call it a response to trauma, you wouldn't exactly be wrong. And that's what I want to talk with you about in this video. Perfectionism was never a topic or a concept I ever thought I'd be thinking too deeply about. And yet here we are, right? I've always thought that perfectionism was more or less a good thing. You know, when people are in interviews, sometimes they're asked to name a weakness that they have. And some people will say like, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I like to make sure things get done. Like they'll frame perfectionism as a weakness, but they expect you to accept it as a strength, right? It's something that they're proud of. And I think for most of my life, it was that way too. I saw perfectionist tendencies within myself. And even though I know there's some downsides to it, I was kind of proud of it and I felt like it was something that made me better, not worse. But just two specific pages in a book I've recently been reading changed my whole perspective on perfectionism. I've been reading the book called Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Maybe you've heard of her. She describes perfectionism in a specific section, and she says this about it. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect, live perfectly, work perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. Now see, that was really eye-opening for me because when I think of perfectionism, that's not what I think about. And so it kind of, upon further reflection, it allowed me to see how the way perfectionism shows up in my life, how it's been holding me back from doing my best and feeling my best, really, ultimately. For example, for a long time with making these videos, when I'm recording it, if I had a thought I was trying to get across, I would repeat it and then repeat it and repeat it. I kept on starting over because I wanted to sound perfect. I wanted to make sure that the thought flowed right. If I stuttered, I wanted to like redo it. And then eventually I got to the point where I stopped trying to say it perfectly, but in editing, I would cut out all the kind of the space where I'm not talking, where I'm thinking, or cut out the space where maybe I was stuttering or I wasn't speaking the way I wanted to speak. And I would try to appear perfect through editing. And it got to the point where I realized I'm not doing this because I want to make the best video and I feel like this is going to help me communicate better. I'm doing this because I'm trying to separate myself from the feeling of judgment or the fear that someone might think that I'm not expressive enough or articulate enough. I was worried about judgment. There's a fear there. And that's where perfectionism kind of stems from in my life. During my journey of learning how to speak Spanish and communicating in Spanish, I would spend so much time in my head trying to translate from English to Spanish and then speak that I would never actually speak. Like it would cripple me because I was trying to be perfect instead of just speaking imperfectly. And it would cause a type of social anxiety. And it was a weird situation because I'd focus so much on like trying to avoid, like allowing the fear of someone realizing I'm not a great speaker yet or I'm not fluent be the thing that prevents me from even trying to communicate at all. So I'd let my fear of judgment and my feeling of shame overtake my desire to simply communicate. So you've probably noticed a root cause here, right? My perfectionist tendencies tend to come from a place of worrying about what other people might think, the perspectives of others, even if it's not their real perspectives, even if it's just imagined or in my head. Instead of doing things for the genuine desire to just be better, to do better. And as Brene Brown puts it, it's a desire to avoid the painful feelings at times of judgment and shame and hurt. And I think that shows up in my life. And I'm realizing that more and more as I analyze and shine a light on different areas of my life. And that's something that we tend to do. We look into the places that we feared to look, or we chose not to be willfully ignorant. And then when you look at it, you start noticing things and noticing areas in your life that have gaps that you want to fill. Like a cement in a foundation. Like you want to fill all the gaps to make the whole as strong as possible. And this is one of those areas where I'm trying to fill that gap in my life. If you've ever identified as a perfectionist in any area of your life, you may be hearing this and noticing that it had a hand in preventing you from doing things with a pure mind and the desire to just go that you otherwise really wanted to do. Sometimes it's going to hold you back from doing the things that in theory brings the most pleasure to your life. And then when you start to do it, the perfectionist kind of voices in your head The self-limitations that we hold within ourselves prevent us from going anywhere, and it kind of handicaps us. Imperfect action is so much better than perfect action. Like perfect action is when we're thinking so much, and in theory we know exactly what we want to do. It's perfect, but the constant thought leads to inaction. So it's perfect inaction. It prevents us from doing the things that we want to do. It makes us feel like we're in a constant state of ramping up. Like we're gonna do that thing. We're almost there. It's almost ready. I'm almost about to put it into action. Like you're in a constant state of it's almost. Perfectionism can set us down a path in life that can lead to paralysis. It can lead to depression. It can lead to anxiety. And life paralysis meaning all the things in life that we miss out on, that we fail to discover about ourselves because we're unwilling to put something out into the world that might be imperfect. All the dreams we don't follow due to the fear of failure, or making mistakes, or disappointing others. Basically constantly questioning our self-worth. Over the past couple of years of me really trying to develop this channel and build the community and just express myself, I've come across both friends and people I've met online who expressed to me that they've wanted to build a YouTube channel for a long time. You know, they've made notes of video ideas. They've been inspired by other people, and they know that they can do the same thing, maybe even better. And when asked, like, where's it at? All right, like show me the goods, and they haven't started yet. Because. I mean, it's easy to make excuses, but at the end of the day, it's forms of perfectionism. It's the fear of what will people think of me? How will they judge me? Am I even worthy? Who am I to put my face in front of a camera and speak and have people listen to me? It's fears of judgment, right? Fears of not being good enough, questioning what people might think of them if they talk about a certain topic and someone finds out their opinions, their deep hidden opinions about a certain thing. It's all a lot of like self-doubt and self-defeating thoughts. It's all things we mostly make up in our mind. Perfectionism can stop you from even attempting something. It can make you give up on something before you even get started. It can cause dreams to die before they've ever gotten a chance to live. Perfectionism will and does hold you back. Sometimes in big ways before you even start, sometimes in small ways in that it prevents you from being able to do the thing you want to do, or causing you to do it in a way that's not exactly the way you wanted it. But perfection holds us back. In the start of this video, you may remember I said that if you were to call perfectionism a response to trauma, you wouldn't be wrong. And I believe that, because I think perfectionism tends to stem from, it originates at a point in our life where we learned to associate, we started to link a positive association between doing good at something and the feedback and applause and the positive reactions of people to that good job we did. Even though this isn't the way things ideally should be, the reality is when you perform really well and people give you the positive reaction, it can make you feel more appreciated. It can make you feel more loved. And I experienced that a lot growing up, I think, because I was always an athlete. I was always, the top of my school when I was running track or playing sports. And so, especially in elementary school, what I was known for was like the fastest kid in school. Like that was my little label. And it was nice to hear my name next to that and see people's almost like admiration in regards to the way I performed. And that became one of my defining features growing up. And it was the same way with school. Like when I was in elementary school, it's like straight A's. It was like my thing. So like my family, that would be the thing that they kind of brag or talk about when they refer to me. It's like, he's smart, he does well, straight A's. And I think over time, I started to notice patterns. I started to associate doing really good on something with the praise, the attention, and the positive feedback that came with it. And of course I wanted more of it. Of course I wanted to hear my name in a positive light when people talked about me. And so subconsciously, you start to not just associate the two of them, but you view the praise and attention and the way people think about you as a reward for doing good. Because it feels good. It feels good for people to praise you. Like let's not act like that doesn't happen. But it has subconscious effects. It can lead to the trauma that we're talking about as perfectionism. And therein lies the problem. Because that was when you're in elementary school and like high school, but now you're an adult. But that was the foundation for all the good things you've done. And so now you start working hard still, but you're working hard with the awareness of how people might judge you and how they might think about you and how it reflects on you. And then subconsciously, you start connecting, you start tying your self-worth to how you perform. So when you perform good, you feel good temporarily. But when you perform bad, you feel like garbage. And so the flip side of this is that your greatest sense of shame and fear comes from the thing that you enjoy doing the most when it doesn't go well. And this is what makes perfectionism unhealthy and very different from striving to be your best and doing your best. They seem synonymous, they seem like they go hand in hand, but they're very different. But we'll talk about that more in just a moment. Perfectionism isn't evil though. Like it has sincere and positive intentions, but it's a coping mechanism. It's a trauma-based belief system that we develop that prevents us from losing the acceptance and approval of those around us. And in a way, we feel like it keeps us safe. It keeps us protected. It's like your mind saying, shh, stop. Don't do that thing. Because if you do the thing, you're gonna suck at it and people are gonna abandon you. So to combat that, let's sacrifice a bit of your self-worth now in order to have people's approval and acceptance of you long-term. That way you don't die. Because we need everyone's approval in order to survive. The big problem with perfectionism as a coping mechanism, as a tool to use to do our best work and navigate through life, is that it's unrealistic. And it's unrealistic for two main reasons. Number one, perfectionism is unattainable. You ain't perfect, you ain't never gonna be perfect. We wouldn't even know what perfection looks like if it existed, so it's not even worthy to strive towards. Perfect is a myth. Number two, perfectionism isn't about being perfect. It's about appearing perfect. It's about trying to control people's perception of you, which is completely unrealistic because you can't control perception. And so it's not a very good use of your effort and energy in the first place. Here's kind of the sad part though. When we buy into perfectionism and we end up experiencing a feeling of shame or judgment, we blame ourselves. We start questioning why we didn't do good enough or what we could have done to be more perfect. And we sit in those feelings of shame and fear and judgment and blame, instead of looking at the flawed logic and philosophy of perfectionism and attacking that thing. So we attack ourselves instead of attacking the philosophy that caused those feelings that we didn't like in the first place. Another example is that I was in Peru last month and we were in this small town for a couple days and we were looking to get on a bus to leave. And so I walked down to what I thought was the bus station, and I went up to the counter and asked this lady, and in Spanish I asked her like where's the bus station? Can you tell me where the bus station is? And she didn't, like, her response was like no, sorry, no English. And I was like, I'm speaking Spanish. I'm not speaking English. And so I said it again. I said something along the lines of like, ¿Dónde está la estación de bus? Por aquí o ¿dónde está? Right? Very simple. I said it a million times and I've been understood so many times. So I walked away from that feeling kind of like crappy. I felt shame, I felt judgment, a little irritated because I feel like she understood me, but it didn't work out. So I blamed myself instead of blaming the philosophy that caused those bad feelings. The reality is maybe she just has no experience or she feels uncomfortable interacting with people that aren't Peruvian, that don't speak her native tongue. And so maybe she has a form of social anxiety and she just didn't want to handle that. So her way of navigating that feeling on the inside was to just avoid the conversation as a whole. Whatever the reason was, the point is those negative feelings I experienced was a result of perfectionism. This is my desire to be perfect, even in learning a new language. And when the result was that of me being incorrect or not being what I thought I was, I felt fear of how people would respond to me going forward, and I felt judgment, and it kind of affected how I interacted for a few days because of that one experience. And the reality is it was all in my head. Everything that was going on was my imagination, stories I'm telling myself about what might have happened. Perfectionism is a huge obstacle in the pursuit of doing your best, because doing your best requires introspection and curiosity and viewing your failures or your mistakes as opportunities to learn more and do better, instead of it being used as evidence that you're not good enough and that you shouldn't even try, or that you should focus so much on trying and not actually doing that you don't get anything done in the first place, or at least not the way that you really wanted to do it. Perfectionism destroys the curiosity that's needed to do your best in life, to reach your potential. Because it convinces you that there's only two ways of existence. One, be perfect and flawless and don't ever get anything wrong. Or two, get out of here, right? You're not worthy, you suck. And so how can fear and shame and judgment not be the result of perfectionism when it's either be perfect or you're not worthy? It's a flawed philosophy. For a perfectionist, sometimes like they'll never be happy with the work that they've done because their feelings about it are at least in part linked to their belief about how other people think or feel about the work that they've done. So it's really a battle against your own imagination. What you think someone feels, the story you tell yourself about what someone's impression is of something you're doing. And oftentimes we imagine that into the future about something we're doing right now when there hasn't been any feedback. And it's a destructive loop of perfectionism. That's what causes people to lose their individuality. And then they conform their work to what other people kind of want from them. And then they never feel good about it because they're never doing what their intuition wants them to do. They're not expressing themselves fully and purely. It's tainted by the worries about what other people might think. What every perfectionist really wants, whether they know it or not, whether they can acknowledge it or not, is the ability and the space to be able to strive and do their best work, to express themselves in the way that they truly want to put things out there, whatever it is, whatever field you're in, without the burden and the weight of people's opinions or perspectives of what they think about them, and just having tunnel vision to be able to pursue what they want to pursue. My perfectionist traits have held me back from reaching my potential in a lot of things that I've wanted to do, but most notably making videos. For probably the past 2 years, I've wanted to make one video a week, every week, without pause. And I haven't been able to do that because I still run my video ideas through a filter of what would this person think if they heard that perspective? What would be the feedback from the world if I expressed that thought and it was misunderstood? Okay, let me change it. Let me make it more relatable, or let me make this idea in such a way that it can't be misunderstood. And I'm just constantly, especially in the current, like the modern world with, Twitter and like, even though I don't have a big channel, sometimes I worry like, what will people think? And then it prevents me from putting out videos. So instead of putting one video every week, it might take 3 weeks to put out a video because I'm constantly dealing with this back and forth worry about what people might think. The reality is perfectionism taints whatever it is you're trying to put your energy and effort towards, assuming it's something that you have the potential freedom to do exactly the way you want, and other people's opinions doesn't matter. Like, yes, if you work in a corporate job, you might have strict requirements of what you need to do. But if you're building your own business, if you're into the arts, painting, music, videos, anything that allows you complete potential freedom of expression, if you have any perfectionist tendencies, if you have the worries about what people might think about you, and you let it twist or warp the final outcome, your work's been tainted. Your potential has been held back because of perfectionism in some shape or form. In a sense, you could view perfectionism as an addiction to acceptance and approval and praise. And the fear response is related to trauma in regards to fear and shame and blame and self-criticism and doubt. That kind of sounds like trauma to me. Perfectionism is still, like, it has striving for greatness still weaved in there somewhere, but it's just unhealthy because it has what will people think? What will they think? Whoever they is as the center of it. It's focusing on things outside of yourself, things that are external. Healthy striving to be your best and to do great things is internal. It's going through the thought process of, like, how do I feel about this? How can I make this better? What would improve the way this is communicated? How can I make this represent what's in my mind, like, as best as possible? That's healthy. That's trying to be the best you can be. It's all focused on what's going on for you and how you feel. That's the way you want to pursue something when it comes to your right to express yourself. in whatever form that is for you. Very different ways of thinking. One leads to like inner chaos and disruption, and the other way works towards like inner peace and balance. And it takes some introspection and self-awareness to really know which one's which when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the thick of doing something or feeling something. You can't do great work if you're running every decision you make through a filter of what someone might think or react about you. Like imagine, if you will, for a second, that you're a painter and you have all the tools you need to do the absolute best work that you can do. And your goal is to make a painting that will go up on the wall in your private room. No one else will see it. It's strictly for your own satisfaction. But instead of painting your picture in a room alone with solitude to just do whatever you want, you're in a room with like 15 other people that are circled around you. And every time you put your paintbrush to the canvas, you look at them to see their reaction, to see what they want. And every time you pick a color, you're looking at them to see what they want, right? And every time you do a little brush stroke, you're looking at them and you're just looking at people's reaction as you go. What do you think is going to happen when you're done that? Do you think you as a painter will feel good about what you created? Do you think that you'd want to put it up on the wall and that as if that represents your own expression? Of course not. You wouldn't even consider that to be your own art piece. It's been influenced by too many other people when your goal was just to create something for yourself. That's kind of what perfectionism is. That's what's going on in perfectionist heads. Their goal is to create something that they want just for them, that represents themselves, that they feel good about. But it's been tainted with so many other people's opinions, real or imagined, that the outcome is so different. It's so warped from what the true vision for it was in the first place. True self-expression can't be dictated by things outside of you. Perfectionism is like a self-conscious, traumatized parent who claims that they want you to go out into the world and discover who you are and what you want and be the best that you want to be. And just, all right, on the count of three, go on your personal adventure. 1, 2, 3, go. And then as soon as they say go, they're telling you where not to go, what not to do, and what you should do, and what you should be aware of, and maybe you should reconsider this. Like, it's a disguise of wanting you to grow and explore, but the foundation of it is restrictive and holding you back. Sure, perfectionism as that traumatized parent might have positive intentions for you, but every fear that's cast upon you only limits your freedom. It doesn't encourage it. And so if you want the freedom to explore and do great things, you have to let that inner voice pass through and move forward for yourself. Let go of the parent of perfectionism. So I guess the obvious question is, how do you do that? How do you let go of perfectionism? In my opinion, the best thing to do, the first thing to do, is to acknowledge the inner voice that you find yourself reasoning with when making a decision to do or not do something. Watch what those voices are saying. Listen to the dialogue and kind of see, is your decision coming from a place of fear or judgment, or feeling like you're not good enough or not worthwhile? If it is, question where that came from, because it didn't come from you. It's not like we're born feeling full of insecurity or full of shame or feeling fearful. We're not born with that. It came from somewhere. It's the effect of something. You weren't like that when you were a child. You want to know why? Because when you were a child, you didn't know how to view yourself through the eyes of someone else. Perceiving yourself outside of yourself wasn't a skill that you developed yet. And once you developed it, then you started feeling shame. Then you started feeling anticipation and judgment about what your parents might think, what friends in school might think, what society might think. It's a learned behavior. That sense of embarrassment and insecurity and shame, it blossoms in high school. That's why teenagers are so weird and awkward all the time. They feel naked, right? On some Adam and Eve type stuff. They've seen their own nakedness, and it's like, oh, I'm weird. When people look at me, they think I'm a nerd, they think I'm a geek, they think my pimples on my face are like, they're constantly seeing themselves through other people's eyes, and they don't like what they see. And so they get uncomfortable, they get awkward, they get weird. And then eventually, as you get older, you leave school, you leave the constant eyes of other people, and you start becoming a mature adult. You drop worrying about that perception in your day-to-day life, and for the most part, you can just be yourself. And when you be yourself, you're just kind of natural, you're cool, you're normal, and you're no longer that weird, like, robotic teenager that's easily influenced and constantly worried about what people think. So that fear, that judgment and shame, the things that we've been talking about this whole video, is a result of things outside of you. And once you've acknowledged it and you grab that feeling and you really let it marinate, all of a sudden those influences, those outside influences that have been on your mind and the way you act, it dissolves, it disappears. And then it leaves space, not for the perfectionism, but for you to be the best version of yourself that you can be. Not in some cliche way, but genuinely the best version of yourself you can be. Because you're acting off of your own influence, your own desires, your own vision for yourself or whatever it is that you're putting your effort into. What perfectionism really means is that your inner sanctuary has been invaded. Your inner peace is your sanctuary. Your self-worth is your sanctuary. These thoughts, perspectives, expectations of other people don't have a right to invade your inner world, period. And you can take that permission away at any time. But the reality is, let's be honest, it's easier said than done to not be concerned or allow other people's thoughts or opinions to interrupt the way you do things. It has a weight to it. And it takes a long time to be able to develop that mental shield to where you can focus 100% on something and not worry about what people think. It happens. Even with this video, like I'm worried about like, will anyone relate to this? Should I even make the video? But it's a video I wanted to make, so I'm making it. But it's been 2 or 3 weeks since my last video because it took me time to even get to this point because I've been worried about it. I suffer from the same thing. I'm not immune to it. But the good news is that once you realize that perfectionism stands in the way of your internal freedom, your ability to be your best, do your best, and reach your personal potential, to express yourself in an untainted way, you kind of get dropped on this path that will allow you to walk away from perfectionism. And at that point, all you have to do is walk down that path into your inner freedom, as corny as that might sound, and find yourself in a way that you're truly happy and you're able to do the thing that you want to do and not be fighting your demons, as some people might call it. And the reality is, most of the things that we worry about, the little micro stresses that we allow to invade our minds, it's imaginary. It's all in our heads. And like 99.999% of the time, it's just something that comes by, we stress about it, we forget about it, it goes away. And all that stressing and worry was for nothing. It's just us worrying about the future or allowing something from the past to come into our lives and affect the way we show up today in our current lives, So just please remember, the best you can do is always the best you can do. And if you can confidently say that, you have nothing else to worry about. Let's not be too hard on ourselves.